picture this. It's 1972, New Guinea. Jared Diamond, he's there. And a local politician, Yali, asks him this question. It sounds, well, simple on the surface. Yali basically says, why is it that you white people developed so much cargo and brought it to New Guinea, but we black people had a little cargo of our own? And that question, it just cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it? Why steel axes here, gunpowder there, and, well, what Diamond called Stone Age life somewhere else? Welcome, everyone, to the Gist Gab Podcast. Today, we're really digging into that question, trying to unravel the very deep and complex answers behind it.
Yeah, and we're using Jared Diamond's book, the Pulitzer winner, Guns, Germs, and Steel, as our map, essentially. Diamond takes Yali's question and explores how environmental factors really shaped history. He argues against racist ideas and looks for the root causes of these huge global inequalities. And Diamond himself is quite the figure. Anthropology, ecology, physiology, evolutionary biology. He brings a lot to the table.
Absolutely. It's why the book is so compelling. So our goal today is to understand how geography and environment, not inherent differences, led to these wildly different outcomes for societies. We'll look at the immediate reasons for European dominance first, then zoom out to the bigger environmental picture, and finally touch on some specific regions.
Right. So for those immediate advantages, let's think about 1532, the Andes. You've got Francisco Pizarro, the Spanish conquistador, with just 168 soldiers. And he's facing the Inca emperor, Atahualpa, who has, get this, an army of 80,000. I mean, on paper, it's no contest.
It seems completely lopsided. But then you look at the tech. The Spanish had guns, steel weapons, knives, spears, daggers, and horses, which were totally alien there. The Incas, they had mostly wooden clubs, maybe some bolas, those things you throw to tangle legs. And the result, Pizarro's cavalry, just 62 riders, basically smashed through the Inca lines in minutes and grabbed Atahualpa himself, took the leader hostage.
Exactly. But here's what's really fascinating and kind of terrifying. The military tech disparity was huge, yes, but it might not have even been the main thing. It was the germs, the invisible weapons. Europeans brought smallpox, measles, influenza, typhus, diseases Native Americans had zero immunity to. We're talking estimates of like 95% mortality in some areas. Smallpox actually swept ahead of the conquistadors. It arrived in Panama and Colombia, killed the Aztec emperor way back in 1520. Then it moved south, hit the Inca Empire, killed their emperor and his heir, which sparked a massive civil war. So the Inca Empire was already weakened, destabilized, before Pizarro even showed up.
Wow, so it was like this perfect storm brewing. Weapons, germs. What else was tipping the scales?
Well, think about organization. Europe had these centralized states. They could actually fund and organize huge expeditions, build the ships, gather the men, the equipment.
Right, the logistics.
Precisely. And writing. Widespread writing systems were critical. They could share navigational charts, military reports, strategies accurately over distances. Plus, they could draw on centuries of written history, lessons learned from past wars, even, Cortez's recent conquest of the Aztecs. They had a playbook.
Okay, so how did the Incas compare on that front? They were centralized too, weren't they?
They were, but in a different way that became a weakness. Atahualpa wasn't just an emperor. He was seen as a literal sun god. His power was absolute. So when Pizarro captured him, the whole command structure just seized up. His orders, even from captivity, had to be obeyed. It paralyzed them.
Ah, I see.
And their writing system, the quipu, those knotted cords, it was sophisticated for record keeping, like accounting, but it seems it couldn't convey detailed narratives or complex history like alphabetic writing could. So they couldn't easily learn from the Aztec experience just 600 miles north. They were essentially walking into the same trap, completely unaware. They knew almost nothing about the invaders or their history.
That really highlights how these factors weren't separate things. They all worked together, amplified each other. It wasn't just luck, but a whole system of advantages built up over time.
Exactly. And that leads us to the next question, the deeper one. Why did Eurasia have these advantages in the first place? This is where Diamond zooms out to the ultimate causes, the environmental ones.
Right, moving from the what to the why. And a huge factor seems to be just time. How long people had lived in certain places. Humans started in Africa, sure, but people reached Eurasia, around 70,000 years ago? Oceania, maybe 45,000 years ago? But the Americas, people only got there much, much later, maybe around 10,000 years ago, across the Bering Land Bridge. That's a massive head start for Eurasia.
Tens of thousands of years more to develop agriculture, build cities, invent technologies. It's a fundamental difference in timeline. And connected to that is the sheer luck of the draw with plants and animals. Eurasia just happened to have way more species suitable for domestication.
The raw materials for farming and herding.
Exactly. When the climate shifted around 11,000 BCE, that Younger Dryas cold spell, people were pushed towards domesticating plants and animals for a stable food supply. But where could they do that successfully? Overwhelmingly in Eurasia. They had wheat, barley, rice, cows, pigs, sheep, goats, horses. The list goes on.
Compare that to other continents.
Yeah.
The Americas had llamas and alpacas, maybe turkeys, but not much else in terms of big mammals. Yeah. Australia had basically nothing large and domesticable.
It profoundly shaped everything. Surplus food allows for larger populations, specialists who aren't farming, rulers, armies, inventors. It kickstarts that whole process.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, how the availability of, say, wild wheat versus wild teosinte, the ancestor of maize, could have such enormous long-term consequences. It really drives home the power of environmental geography.
It really does.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at how this played out in specific places. Take China, for instance. A really early powerhouse, it developed agriculture independently in the Yellow and Yangtze River valleys. And unlike Europe, which remained fragmented partly due to its mountain ranges and jagged coastlines.
China unified quite early.
Very early. The Qin dynasty, 221 BCE, they standardized roads, writing, currency, creating this huge, relatively cohesive block. And the inventions, paper, gunpowder, printing, the compass. These came out of China and eventually changed the entire world. Its influence across East and Southeast Asia was immense.
Which brings up that classic question Diamond addresses. If China was so far ahead for so long, why didn't Chinese ships, armed with gunpowder, sail to the Americas or Europe?
It's a great question. Part of the answer might lie in that very unity. When one emperor decided to halt maritime expeditions, the whole enterprise stopped. In fragmented Europe, if one king said no, another might say yes. Competition spurred exploration.
Interesting point. Now let's swing over to Oceania, Australia specifically. What was the story there?
Australia faced really severe environmental constraints. As you mentioned, the big domesticable mammals went extinct relatively early after human arrival. Very few native plants were suitable for cultivation. Diamond counts only 2 out of the world's top 56 valuable crops, and much of the continent is incredibly dry and infertile.
So the foundations for agriculture just weren't there.
Pretty much, and the result was no farming, no herding, no metalworking, no writing. Populations remained small hunter-gatherer bands. That quote from the French explorer is brutal, but it reflects that lack of cargo. New Guinea had more domesticable plants and animals, but it's smaller, rugged, and lacked the conditions for large-scale state formation or advanced metallurgy.
Okay, and Africa, the cradle of humanity. Why didn't its long head start translate into similar developments as Eurasia?
It's a paradox, isn't it? Incredible human history, huge genetic diversity, but food production lagged. There just weren't many native African plants suited for intensive agriculture like wheat or rice.
And the animals. Africa has amazing megafauna.
It does, but think about them: zebras, hippos, African buffalo, rhinos. Incredibly hard, if not impossible, to domesticate. They had 51 candidates for domestication, second only to Eurasia's 72, but only 1 success. The guinea fowl. Eurasia got the big 5: sheep, goat, cow, pig, horse. That made a huge difference.
So a lack of easily farmed plants and animals was a major hurdle.
A huge one. And then there's the continent's axis. Africa is oriented north-south, unlike Eurasia's east-west orientation.
Why does that matter?
An east-west axis means that crops, animals, and technologies can spread relatively easily across similar latitudes, similar climates. Think of agriculture spreading across the Fertile Crescent and into Europe. But a north-south axis means drastic changes in climate, ecology, daylight hours, and diseases as you move across latitudes. It makes it much harder for crops developed in, say, Ethiopia to thrive in South Africa, or for livestock adapted to one zone to survive in another due to things like the tsetse fly.
So geography itself created barriers to diffusion within Africa.
Yeah, exactly. It hindered the spread of innovations and resources, slowing down overall development compared to more interconnected Eurasian landmass.
It really paints a picture of how these specific environmental conditions, continent by continent, channeled history in such different directions. Less about the people, much more about the place.
Which brings us right back to Yali's question that started it all. Diamond's answer after laying all this out is pretty unequivocal. The vast differences we see in historical trajectories aren't about innate differences in people, intelligence, ingenuity, whatever. They are overwhelmingly the result of environmental differences. Geography, climate, the local flora and fauna. That's what dealt the cards.
And of course, history isn't static. Power shifts. The Fertile Crescent was once the center of innovation, but environmental degradation like deforestation and salinization from irrigation played a role in its decline. Europe wasn't always dominant.
Absolutely. Human actions interact with the environment constantly. We shape it, and it shapes us.
It definitely makes you think.
It does. And, anthropology and archaeology are always evolving. We're getting better tools, more data, genetics, climate modeling, satellite imaging. So maybe a final thought for you to ponder is, as we get a clearer, more scientific picture of how our deep environmental past shaped us, how can we use that understanding? How might knowing these root causes help us tackle present-day inequalities or build a more sustainable, maybe more harmonious future, knowing how profoundly environment influences our fate?